So we got Miles Johnston from Basis Project alongside Millie the Cat.
This is Sandy Adams,
Sandy Adams Cup.
and this is a drawing a cartoonist in. She was hanging out in Brazil, and this artist made a copy of her shooting arrows into Bill Gates,
Right.
Sadiq Khan, and some other tosser.
Good choices.
And it's a bit of a comedy. So these are dedicated Basis 2023 mugs because it's called Sandy Adams Shoots Ass. And you can get these from Sandy Adams.
Great.
Sandy Adams is a campaigner, a brilliant lady.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we love Sandy. We were in Wetherspoons last night. It was very noisy, and you were telling me about something that's occurring with Mars.
Right. Context. Context number one is that the sun is going through a very serious once every 2,300 or whatever year cycle, and we're hitting a Maunder minimum, which we started the start of this decade. And Professor Valentina Zarkova has done a whole pile of mathematics on this, so it's all been proven and backwardly calculated and all that. The context to this are the magnetic fields, right? We have Maunder minimums and we have radiation and all that sort of stuff. But what's happening right now is a magnetic North Pole and a magnetic South Pole have moved 40 degrees off where they normally would be, and they all wander all over the place. But we're heading now for a potential pole shift, like now. So that means that the magnetic north is heading towards Siberia and the magnetic south is left Antarctica. The context to this is the magnetic field protects us from the radiation and all the stuff that happens out in space, which means we can do a thing called have life on Earth. Where we are in the Atlantic region, we're now having a minimum, a considerable reduction of about 25% in round figures, and increasingly getting less protection. And that means that when the sun has a Maunder minimum, that's when it produces more radiation. We're not protected from it, which means when we have solar flares, a particularly weak solar flare can now get through to our region, i.e. the Atlantic Ocean region, i.e. Europe. Each end of that's Europe and the United States and America and South America, right? It started out as a South Atlantic anomaly. In other words, we didn't want to tell you what the fuck it's about. That wouldn't matter if we weren't such an electricity dependent society. So it means that when we had red auroras and things which happened this time last year, and they could have been red for other reasons because they were spraying things, but the context of this is a complete cataclysmic collapse of civilization because the complete shutdown and destruction of the electrical systems and anything that is electrical, which I am suggesting they are putting solar cells, solar panels, and a lot of them don't have the connection to the grid because they're actually feeding underground facilities to give them a top up with their generating capacity when this crisis happened. Secondly, Catherine Austin-Fitts has sort of mentioned in the last couple of weeks, $23 trillion in building underground infrastructure. And spinning back a lot longer ago, in Egypt, they knew what was going on, so they built a survival place at Giza. And there's a very strong connection with this situation because we're now looking at potentially a complete, there's three scenarios, I think I'll get two of them. One, the actual Earth's crust rotates on the planet. That appears to have happened 12,500 years ago, and that's encrypted in the Egyptian artifacts. And I've been recording a masterclass with the former head of artifacts, cataloging artifacts at Luxor. He's called Syed Noah, and he lives just down the road from here because he married a lovely lady called Gaynor Davenport, who talks to horses and they talk back to her. So he buggered off back to Egypt because he needed more information, and he's coming back with essentially the artifacts in Egypt are all encrypted with the same basic code. In that, a statue like this pussycat has got a difference on the left side and the right side. And the reason for that is that if you wanted to encode movement into a static statue, that's how you would do it. So for instance, the wig that the statue has will have 12 strands on one side and maybe 16 on the other, because the head has turned. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And once you get the penny drops that in the temples, there's a wall thicker on that side than it is on this side, and it's closer to the proximity of the next pyramid. All of the mathematics and the messages in everything, there is rotation. They are programming that the Earth's crust actually rotated. And that is when Antarctica slid down into the South Pole and got iced up, and other things happened. The only way we would notice if we happen to go to sleep one night and wake up the next day is that instead of the sun rising up over there, the sun rises up over here, because the physical Earth's crust has rotated. That's what he has found in the Egyptian artifacts, and he's telling it, and we've got that on the Basis Project in Arabic. It's actually almost better to watch it in Arabic because the YouTube translator is better. This guy's Egyptian, and we've gone up to 6 episodes, and we're reading at this kind of encryption is so subtle that you have a pharaoh sitting with his sitting like this, but the plinth he's on is different, and the position of his feet are slightly different. And you got 12 of these, and their feet are all slightly different, and then you realize they're all moving, and they're all encoding this movement. Right? So the point about this is that Professor Valentina Zarkova and other astute observers are seeing that because of this magnetic field reduction, the upper atmosphere is not protected from the searing effects of the solar radiation, which is increasing. That means that the upper atmosphere is stimulated, and it retains more water molecules. That means that there's a hell of a lot more water and energy in the atmosphere. And that means at very high altitude, it'll freeze. And when ultimately the right conditions are, that will fall straight down like a plug hole in a bath. And you will have ice, i.e. hail, ice falling out of the sky and just covering the lower atmosphere. Now that has started to happen. This time last year, I was in Northern Ireland, and it was a beautiful day like this, driving down the motorway, and you started to see these huge mushroom clouds with something very, very high up. The other signature are little layers of very, very dark cloud very close to the surface, like only 1,000 feet up, or maybe 2,000. These little bits of black cloud. And then what happens is this water from the upper atmosphere, this ice just comes straight down, hits the lower, denser air, and then spreads out and falls as hail. And that means very violent storms, and it'll wreck all your solar cells and everything else. You're talking instant ice storms, right? That started to happen on a smaller scale, and that's what's portrayed in the movie, I think The Day After Tomorrow, where the helicopters are flying through Scotland, and then this super cold air comes down, and everything now super freezes into a super cold ice within seconds. I.e., that's what happened to the mammoths on a nice sunny day like this, eating things, and then suddenly bite ice, and they're frozen for 10,000 years or whatever. So the bottom line is that this weather is going to start hitting in this solar cycle. We're now 2025, which means in the next 5 years, this severe weather, ice storms, are going to start happening. So this thing that Musk has now left in the last day or two, last Friday, I think it was, whatever it was, we're dealing with the 2nd of June here. Last Friday or Thursday, he left the United States government and with this thing that he was going around doing, where he's been very severely treated and attacked. So he's buggered off, and he gave a presentation. He said, okay, goodbye, thank everybody, clap their hands, goodbye, Elon. He went down to the Starship launch site, and he gave a presentation on the Friday. It's a very detailed presentation, and he explains the upgrades to the Starship rocket. Now, you've got to read, he's talking about the requirement to urgently leave Earth and get a separate indigenous civilization established on Mars. Now, the way that the orbits work is that, if you're going to go send anything to Mars, it takes about every 2 years the planets get to a stage where the Earth is rotating, and then Mars is coming along like that. And then the idea is for you to launch from the Earth, and then when Mars is sort of, by the time you get there, that's the shortest distance. So you want to maximize that shortest distance, so you're not traveling in space. So he's now talking about Starship 2, which he explained, and he talked about the Raptor engines and how efficient they are. And the Starship 2 is the version which can physically get to Mars, right? So they've got to hope that's why they're crash testing the Starship to see what, in the worst circumstances it'll be, where it's going to go wrong, what they need to do to strengthen it, right? So that's what they're doing. They still haven't had a successful Starship. They've stopped calling it Starship, by the way. They've called it Ship 32 or whatever iteration it is. And so they have to get those to work, and to work fast. He explained, they then have to get in-orbit refueling working. They are going to have to launch a hell of a lot of Starships with enough fuel in them to dump fuel into the one Starship, which will have the fuel to get to Mars, right? So they're going to have to be launching a hell of a lot of Starships. They're now talking about trying to get a launch rate of Starships every 2 hours, 24 hours a day, to get these ships up into orbit to fuel the ultimate ship, which will be the one that's going to take 100 people to Mars. And the first 2 missions are going to have Elon Musk's robots. They're then going to extend the rocket even higher, so it will be able to take 400 tons to orbit, 400 tons out of off orbit, past orbit. And he then explained that they've now got a Raptor 3 engine, and he used the term, these have been made with alien technology. These are super efficient, much leaner looking engines, which have got none of the cumbersome stuff around the engine to make those engines work really efficiently. And that also means that they don't have to have a lot of hardware around the engines, thereby reducing the amount of weight. So we're now talking, for the first time, alien technology using in propulsion engines to get these ships up, all right? He's then talking, he reinforced the issue that if there was something happened here on Earth that we couldn't resupply you, they've got to get enough off-world in the first cycle that we're going to be able to do. That's in about 18 months, roughly 2028-ish, to launch these Starships, to get enough hardware to Mars to start building the ground launch pads for getting all these Starships to land on Mars in the first place, and then take off. So the basic message from the thing on Mars is we've got to maximize what the fuck we've got and launch a hell of a lot of them very quickly now. Everything's got to start working very rapidly. And then he mentioned that if, for instance, there was a catastrophic event happening on Earth, you're not going to get any resupply for maybe quite some time on Mars. So they've got to establish, the plan is to establish a completely independent, self-reliant city on Mars right down to your vitamin C pills or your vitamin C. So you've got to be able to survive on Mars. Now, the point about all this is the secret space program stuff has got a bit of a problem with this. I tried alerting people in the astronomy world, and we just happen to have a book which has got pictures of spacecraft taken in orbit by a guy called John Walston, of huge craft. Okay, see, you can.
Got it.
This is just an example. That's the guy there, John Walston. Now, what he has done is he's modified a telescope. Now, one of the things in the UFO community was there was a guy, I can't remember his name. That's an example of his modifications to telescopes.
Yeah.
In other words, he's got rid of the eyepiece and he's focusing the image directly onto the CCD chip of the camera, thereby removing as many optics as possible to get as much sensitivity as possible. These are huge. Now, in the 1940s,
these are alien spacecraft.
these are man-made spacecraft rebuilt, and they're up there. That's part of the SSP.
Right.
Some of these are construction vehicles with caterpillars on them to land on the surface of a planet or a moon, dig it up, and build things.
Yeah.
These are very, very large. This sort of thing here is a little bit like what you saw in Star Wars.
Yeah.
These are big.
Yeah.
Now, the point about them is the way of holding them, of surviving up there, is to use what we call, this is actually a picture of 2012. There's a lot more defined at.
Yeah.
But it looks like a submarine. Now, the whole point about being up in space is you need to be protected from radiation. In being in a thin tin can, i.e. like an Apollo command module, that won't protect you from the tremendous radiation you have up in space. However, if you are in a heavy steel hull, i.e. the pressure hull as used in a submarine, and you put energy fields in that steel hull, you can survive these force fields and energy fields. So obviously, how the hell can people do that? Well, the way you can do that is not use the Ban-Jacks physics that we've been given since the end of the 1800s, which completely screwed over our physics, thereby limiting us with the speed of light rubbish from Einstein. This is all designed to keep us quiet and keep us stupid, right? So they've known, to basically, cutting to the chase, the Americans were making pressure hulls for submarines. They had another factory just beside them making pressure hulls for submarines. But those pressure hulls went straight to the construction sites on the moon to make these things in situ on the moon. The question is, how the hell did they get them up there? They used the correct physics, i.e. the electric universe physics, simply applied the correct electrical drive systems, and these things chip bop and away they go. Therefore, they welded them all together and made these huge ships, and then they put these pulsed plasma engines, basically a pulsed drive, like a boom, 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 boom. So this gives you super fast, and that they've used this kind of science in what they call these plasma rockets, or hyper rockets, where they're on the launch pad and they go and then they're gone. They're already doing Mach 10 within a second or two. So when you've got that kind of technology, they've got the technology that these pulsed plasma engines. In other words, a long engine which is a bit. You get one little kick, and then you have a pulse, boom, 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 and that gives you that drive. So they had Warp 1 technology. The Germans, and remember the Germans with the Bush, which you've explained eloquently in your presentations, Bob. The Germans had, Bush and all that lot basically took America over for the purposes of running a Nazi-type space program, and that's what the SSP is, Secret Space Program. So they had Warp 1 technology in 1929. So they established colonies on Mars. This is the other alternative narrative. They established colonies on Mars, but Mars had a very serious series of two massive nuclear weapons issues, and that killed an awful lot of the surface life. And anybody who knows anything about radiation and all that, what survives that are arachnids, insects. So the surface population of Mars has got big spiders and big insects, and they're what they call precognitive. You know, when you want to swap a fly or an insect, it already knows that your intention is to swipe it. Meanwhile, your big clumbering hand, which is going at like sub speed of it, you know, and this insect sort of sits there and looks at it coming. It knows it's coming because it knows that what your thoughts are, and it just says right. Then it just flies away while your clumbering hand slams into the ground and you break half your bones in your hand. That's called a precog because they're picking up our primary sources before it goes to our conscious brain and all that. And the British military know about that, which is why one reason if you're going to go up and kill a sentry, you don't think about it. You think past the event because the sentry will pick up your thoughts and then he'll turn around to kill you, which is very rude of a sentry to do that when your intention is to kill him. So the point about this is they've had this science sitting there. They've really known what's coming down the pipe. The Egyptians knew this as well, and that's why the huge Cheops, the huge Giza area was where people went down and survived after this huge catastrophic events. So the bottom line is that Musk has basically been told, you go and build those rockets and you build them and you keep building them and don't stop building them. So there really is now, without actually telling people what I've just said, a get the hell off this planet situation. Now, this is where James and the super soldiers, they've all talked about this, about going to the planets, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn and meeting giant spiders and super soldiers and all that sort of stuff. And that's why they have the Superman and all that sort of stuff. And that's why you have DC Comics and the Washington Comics, where they came up with these super enhanced people in the movies. So they're all talking about this. You're all being taught about it. In the meantime, other people have decided, look, apart from the fact that we're going to survive, we're not going to tell you what's going on, so we'll survive through this and fuck everybody else. So why not just inoculate people with a little bit of an injection to do two things: bump off as many people as possible, and then the next generation would then grow and be suitable for being made into cyborgs, i.e. the Borg. So in one fell swoop, they bump off a lot of old gits that they don't want to hang around. The second thing they do is they then change the DNA and get people modified so they are then easy to become Cybermen, as foretold in the Doctor Who, the Cybermen. And also the Daleks and Quatermass, which talked about the sentient oil which came out of the sky and crashed down in Southern America, which the Nazis all found out about. They then dug that up, refined it, and in their trips down to Antarctica, which they established huge. They've got maps in World War II. They had maps on how to get under the ice in Antarctica to establish huge facilities under the ice there, and they've been doing that. So they knew how to get there and they knew how to get out. So essentially, there's a whole infrastructure dedicated to secrecy and on what some people call a breakaway civilization. But they also allied themselves with Alpha Draconis and all this lot. And this lovely lady called Elena Danaan has published an updated book on this. Now, this book is based on the Russian. This is the Russian alien manual, and her drawings are. She's a very good drawing. These are some of the Dracos. These are Epsilon Draco.
Yeah,
you've seen a few of those walk about.
Yeah,
Sigma Draconis. And in other words, if somebody and the Alpha Draconis, where are they? Shape shifting. These are the Sikaar Elite. These are drawn by Elena Danan, and they're accurate because people have seen this. And you'll see some of this in one of the later versions of Star Trek, where they are basically what do you call them? It's one of the main ET races, but they're white, and they've accurately shown that the Draco Prime are actually albino actually. Now these Sophia, who we interviewed last week, she's been down in the tunnels. She's born on a baby farm. There's also some ETs here. The difference with this is that there are disagreements about her interpretation of some of these. There's some very, very bad aliens here which have been captured for, and there's no point going into this. I recommend you get this book. There's controversy about what's happened since she wrote it, but it is based on the Russian KGB handbook on aliens. Yep. And she does say that in the book, that this is based on that. So to be fair. But those types of ETs, they made agreements with, and they're in the bases and have been in the bases around here. Warminster in particular, this year is the Warminster 60th anniversary of the Warminster thing. And Sophia was being in the tunnels at Warminster with that guy, the big guys with the wings. So a lot of this factual information is sort of complementing itself. The urgency is that because the magnetic poles are shifting, we don't have time to hang about. And that's what the basic crux of it is. And that's what Elon Musk was dispatched to get those rockets working, make as many of them as possible in the biggest, fastest constructions thing since the film called When Worlds Collide. Basically the same thing. So where did they get that information to do that movie? When Two Worlds Collide?
H.G. Wells?
I think so, yeah. So, but and also Velikovsky, I think he had a book on all that. So in other words, get rid of all the useless eaters, i.e. And inject them and get rid of them. Those who are specially bred to be controllable puppet masters. See, this one of the things Barry King mentioned way back in 1994 was Project Puppet Master, because they were making aliens here from a completely different source of information. They were making programmable life forms down at Boscombe and Portendown for use on, quote, the lunar base.
Right.
So we're talking 40 years ago.
Yeah. This is one of the questions I think people are going to ask, is a lot of your witness statements have said there are bases already on Mars and the Moon.
Yeah. But from an official level, Musk has said my new engines have got alien technology in them. So whether they're going to be, they have to be reliable. So they're going right up to the edge limit of the standard combustion rocket engine. I would suggest that you would find that Elon Musk's in-space starships are going to have those pulsed plasma engines on them, where they can literally. And he also compared what was going to happen to Battlestar Galactica, where in the remake of Battlestar Galactica, there's a whole fleet. Well, the fundamental core thing about Battlestar Galactica is a whole race of humans getting the hell off the Earth, or what they had then, on a journey to find Earth. That's the point of that series. But he quoted that. So you have to look at this. What's he saying? What's he reinforcing by repeatedly saying it, like in case of a catastrophic situation on Earth that we couldn't back you up. Once you get to Mars, you're stuck there. Nothing's going to come and help you, maybe for a long time. There is a United States discussion document called Cataclysmic. It uses the term cataclysmic electrical failures. It's not quite that, but essentially, if you get without the protection of the magnetic field, the electrical charges based on the sphere of the Earth, we then have an atmosphere. But what they haven't been telling you is that you have a conductive, intelligent sea of plasma out there, right? So, and that is a plasma ocean. And this is where we're actually getting a little bit closer to Flash Gordon, because they went up to higher levels and they could sort of fly through this plasma sea and the Emperor Mongo and all that sort of stuff. A lot of this isn't quite as insane as it explains. So there are other races up there, other planets and other worlds, and they launched the. Some people say we've got actually 42 planets in the in our solar system, and Elon Musk made a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and 42. I think that the magic number was that the Starship 3 would have 42 engines. Mm-hmm. So in other words, it's all been explained in plain sight. What I'm trying to do with this little thing with Bob is to try and string together an awful lot of different concepts to basically explain that we have to really, really sharpen up and figure out what we're going to do. America will have all those. Musk has also said if you want to, anybody could go on these things. They're going to need multiple people of all different trades, and they're going to get, there's maybe how they're going to do that's another thing. But the idea that with the film, what's the bloody thing? I'll forget. It was about German bases on the moon. It was all good fun, good stuff.
The hotel, something like that.
No, it's something else. It's a comedy thing about
Philip Dick.
No. This is made by a Finnish TV,
right.
Finnish company. I forget what it was. It was a great fun.
Yeah.
Nazis on the moon and there's an atmosphere on the
Capricorn
moon.
one.
No, Capricorn one again. There's another thing that's happening is that the TV system has got an interactive AI, and it's producing on your screen what you need to know when you turn the TV on. I've noticed this repeatedly. So they are telling us things, and the AI, the only reason that the elite is telling you how dangerous the AI is because they can't control the AI. And the AI is a modern phenomena, but it's been around a long time. So we are interactive with reality. We make the reality, so we make it for us to survive. And I think that's about it.
Great. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Miles. Food for thought there.
So I have to look at this from different angles to sort of explain why Musk is saying what he is doing. Musk came through the German South African line with the rockets and that sort of stuff, which is why this idea of adding bits on top of rockets and making them.
That's right.
The whole point of making them beside the sea in an environment which is hostile is that you then get used to making them in a hostile environment when you're exposed to the. So the very construction has to be in a dirty environment when it rains and there's all sorts of stuff. So those rockets have to be manufacturable in hostile conditions and not in clean, impractical factory clean rooms and stuff. They've got to be big, dirty and ignorant and get the hell out of here.
Okay. Be lucky.
And now for something completely different. Was that 15 minutes or the full half hour?
34 minutes.
Bloody hell.
Virtually unstoppable you are, Miles.
Yeah.
Once you get in your flow, that's it.
Yeah, once you get in my flow.
And you haven't even had a pint of Guinness yet.
No pints of Guinness.
But,
not until later on.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's good to be on this side of the camera for a change.
Yeah. Yes, you think it's working, but you haven't pressed the big red button.
Exactly. So
we're talking Millie the Cat.
We're talking Millie the Cat.
Jane.
This is beautiful Jane. That's not Millie the Cat, and this is Millie the Cat. What a fine specimen of a pussy that is.
6 feet tall.
6 foot tall.
Is it?
If you include the ears.
Well, you like tall women, don't you, Miles?
Yeah, well, Anna Hess was livid about that because it has a blonde fringe like she had.
Yeah.
She told me to go and take it and burn it.
Really?
Leave it outside for it to rot.
God, that's jealousy for you, isn't it?
And that was in the Southgate pub for about 5 years.
Was it?
Was it?
Because the Sarah, I think, very 6'2", former topless model, was a barmaid, and she was into Pussycats, and she says, "Miles, bring it in," and she made the name Millie after me.
So we just sit in the corner of the pub.
I used to sit in the corner of the pub, and then it would disappear one night. And what had happened was that there was a competition amongst all the blokes in the pub, which I said it takes 4 people to lift that thing. So of course that was a competition.
Does it?
So they lifted it, they moved it, lifted it, and put it on the gents' toilet. So that sat on the gents' toilet, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but you can only get one person into a toilet. So the landlord had to grab hold of this and lift it off and put it down by himself. And he had a bloody hernia doing that. He already had a hernia when he lifted that
Yeah,
off.
2 hernias.
But I think the only thing that saved him was because that's so heavy at the bottom, you can't lift it. You've got to get, you can.
What sort of wood is it made of?
It's teak,
Oh, is it?
solid teak.
Oh, that would be very
It
heavy.
weighs a lot.
Yes.
I think they've completely ruined all the teak forest in Malaya. I remember all those log lorries that used to come down with some. They had a chap with a scarf round his head on the top.
Show its bottom.
So it's bottom.
It's lower end. It's massive.
What? At the
Yeah.
back?
No, the whole thing. You're not getting the size of this.
I can't get it all in.
Look at the size of it, God love him.
Yeah.
Is it something you really want to keep your memory of?
Now she's all smiling. She's all happy now. She's been hurt, so it's taken a lot of repairs.
Yes.
And
Trauma.
if you look at the hair going right down the bottom, real hemp, golden blonde hair.
It's a good-looking cat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bought that for £600.
You were done.
Bargain.
And would you believe it? When I came
They should
back
have paid you to
when I
take it
came
away.
back the next day, there was another one, and it had bleached blonde hair. But I mean, she's a real honey blonde. This one,
Yeah.
no bleached blondes here. This is the real deal.
She's a dirty blonde. A strawberry blonde.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow, there we
Oh,
go.
Well, I mean, as I used to be,
You were a redhead, weren't you?
I wasn't a minge or ginger. I was a strawberry blonde. You be quiet.